In this video, we'll show you how to keep server and client-side rendering synchronized. The general idea is that the client requests data from the server talks to a database, it gets the data from the database and generates HTML code with the data from the database. And this HTML code is passed to the client. So what we saw there was server-side rendered. At some point, the client has a button that says Show More. The client clicks on Show More, and the server gets the request. In this case, the server talks to the database, gets the data from the database, but it is not going to generate the HTML code for the client. Actually, the server is going to grab the data from the database and is going to pass this data as objects. That's the usual stuff. So this array of objects is going to be passed to the client. This is done to save bandwidth and also to not give the data load to the server, so it doesn't have to generate the HTML on the main servers, but on the client. Once the client gets this array of objects, the client will be in charge of generating more of these user interface elements. So if it gets 2 objects, it could loop through them, generate 1 and 2 objects. So how do we keep this in sync? If we make a change to the server HTML code, how is that going to be reflected in the client HTML code without having to change this in 2 places? I will show you that with code in a second. You know the deal. Notification, like and subscribe. So let's close this. And now we're going to get into the coding part. The first thing we need to do is we need to have the index page. Call it index.php. And over here, we're going to have an HTML template. Let's just call it server-side rendering and client render. Shortcut for it. Save, and now I'm going to test it. So inside localhost, we get the right. Let's create the data that is going to render a user. We're going to keep it really simple. So you concentrate on in this topic. I'm going to create a PHP tags here, and I'm going to create some data. I will call it JData. And this is going to be just JSON data that we get from the database. In order for you to understand this, I'm going to create a JSON object, the code, and a string that looks like JSON. And this string will contain an ID for the user. ID will be 1. And it will also contain a key called name, and the name will be the letter A. So all this is going to be a user. We're not going to concentrate on styling it. So once we have the user, we want to generate some HTML and populate the HTML with this data. So we could echo, and over here we're going to echo, let's do it with double quotes. We're going to create a div with the class user. Now I'm going to single quote it internally, and we're going to close the div. If we do a test, reload the page, we get the letter X. Now, what we want to do is we would like to have the ID and the name of the user. For now, we're just going to display that the name of the user is whatever we have inside JData. Copy the variable JData, and then we point to the name. Save, and we test again. So we get an MA. Imagine for a second that it has layout, it has the last name, it has a lot of data, buttons, and so on. Now, eventually we have a button that says get more data. With the button, see more, show more, anything like that. When we click on this button, we would like to get the next let's say 25 users, the next 25 emails or products. On click, we're going to call a function that is going to get us more products. I want to say get more. Since we're talking about users, we don't have the function. Let's build it. I'm going to create a script tag. I'm going to close it. Now we're going to build the function that we called get more users. This function is going to talk to an API and it's going to get the users. Connect to the API, get the users in an array. You get the idea. So pretend that that is going to happen. We're going to get the users, and the last thing we do is render the users. To render the users, we have to create a div. Let's create here a general div so we can put the users internally. Div, I will close the div, and this div will have an ID called users. We open the div here, and then we close it down there. Talk to the database, we extract the data, we loop through the data, and we somehow generate this div with the class user. So this is the PHP part, and this is going to be the JavaScript part. Once we have to render the user, what we will usually do is we're going to create a variable. It could be a let, it could be a const, and this variable is going to be a user div. And this will be the div. I will backtick it now. And most likely it's going to be done like this, and you will always do this, most of you. So the div will be internally there, and the name will be the name that we will get from this array of users. For the sake of the example and to keep it really simple, pretend that we are inside a loop and pretend that we got one user. It could be a let, it could be a const, you. In this case, I will just create a user object. That's the object that we got. It also has an ID. In this case, the ID will be 2, and it has a name. And in this case, the name will be B. Let me save it and quickly do a test. See if there are any errors. Not that I can see here. Let's open the console, reload. There are no errors. That's looking good. And what we would like to display is the user with its name, user.name. This is this user, and the name is that name. Since this is the variable that we want to show, and we have open and close with backticks, we can do a string literal by doing that temporarily. And once we have this done, we have to show this user inside the div users. So we're going to get the div users. We're going to, I was going to do a get element by ID. We're going to do a query selector now. And what we're going to select, we're going to select the users div by its ID. And we're just going to put the inner HTML to be whatever the user div contains. We're going to see a bug there, a logical bug. Let's try it first. Click. Now you can see the logical bug that disappeared, and that's because you have to concatenate whatever the user div contains followed by the new div. So let's reload. Now we have the 2 users. This class is not about security, so I hope you're not going to comment about the use of the inner HTML. It's about server-side and client-side render, keeping it in sync. Once we have done this, imagine that the system has grown. You have a lot of data for the users, a lot of HTML, a lot of tags, spans, H1s, and so on. Eventually, you realize that server-side rendering is really useful because it gives you search optimization ranking And you know that getting ranked via a client-side rendering is much more complicated. But then you decide to make a change and you say that this name is going to be inside an H1. Spot the line of code, and then you set an H1 into it. Now you save it, you're really happy with the system, you reload, and then you have name A as an H1. When you get more, you can see that the client-side render is out of sync because the name A has an H1 and the name B doesn't have it. Now you need to go to the client side, spot the change, and you could add an H1 to the client. Now, I know that for now this seems really easy to do, and it is. Once the system is huge and you have hundreds of thousands of lines, you don't want to start doing this because you can easily go out of sync between the client side HTML render and the server side HTML render. So to solve this, we are going to undo the H1, and this is how you have to solve it. The best thing you can do is you can create a template for the user, so for this div. I'm going to do that. Usually you will have a folder called templates, but for now I will just call it user template.html. And this is a plain HTML file, and it actually is really nice to use it because you can just throw HTML tags in there. And for this case, this is going to be the user. Now you know that you had the name, and now you need to put the name A or B in there. But since this is a template and this is always the same except the name of the user, you're going to invent a placeholder inside this name. So the A or the B is going to be replaced with a placeholder. To demonstrate this placeholder, you can do it with the mustache technique if you want it, and then you do name. That means that in here you're going to replace the data with a name. You can invent whatever you want. You can also do this if that's what you want. And that means that this is going to occupy the space for the name. Also do it like this or like so if that's what you wanted. It doesn't really matter. It's just a placeholder that will be replaced. I'm not going to use curly braces because you may think or you may be confused with JSON objects, so I will just do it like this. Now I know that this is going to be replaced with a name. I save the template. Now we go back to the index page. And the first thing we need to do is we need to, well, we connect to the database, we get the data, but we also need to get the template. So we'll create a variable, and we call it user template. And this is going to be whatever we get from the file that I called user template. User template. I'll get contents, we'll open the file, and will give me the template. So now that I have the user template in place, I can just echo the user. Save. Let's see the box. Yes, not find the file user template because a .html file. I have to say .html. Let's see if that was the box. Right. So now this is the name that I need to replace. I'm going to use a function in PHP that replaces data. I will say that the user.template equals, and I think the function is called strreplace. If not, I will have to Google for it. I'm going to replace the old value, which is this placeholder. So I copy it. I'm going to replace it with the new value, which is the name coming from JData. And the last argument, it is where this string that I'm looking for is contained on, and that's contained inside the user template. So go to the user template, find the placeholder name, replace it with the new name, and whatever that text contains, put it inside this variable that I call user. If it and test it, we get the letter A. Now, how do I use the exact same template inside JavaScript? But be careful. Before you do this, you have to consider that I overwrote the original user template. So it is not a good idea to overwrite this template. It has to be kept intact. So it's better to just make a copy. I will create a copy of it. Now this variable is going to contain the text that has changed. And if I duplicate it, I just show you the user template, you will see that the original template has not been altered, which is this one. Okay, that is the server-side render with a template. Now let's go to the client side. Inside the script, we need to have the exact same process. We need a copy of the user template, and we know that is inside this variable. I'm going to create a function, and I will call it, now remember, this is client-side user template. Don't get confused with the variable that I created server side. This happens in the server, this happens in the client. So the user template will equal, and then I will backtick it. And inside these backticks, I want to put whatever I have inside the user template that I opened from PHP. So what I will do is I will echo, and this, by the way, is a shortcut for saying echo. So for saying echo like so. So I will just echo it one simple statement, the user template. I will console.log the variable user template so you can see what it contains now. Reload, check the console. Now you see that the exact same template that we had server side has been passed to the client. Now we can use it. Let's continue. Delete this console. Now we know that this contains the correct data. I am going to just have the user, we connect to the API, we parse it, we look through it, and then we have the user div. And this user div is going to be not that anymore, it's going to be the template that we have inside the user template. I will just replace this so you can see what I get out of it. Now you can see that the client actually is rendering this template. So we have to do the exact same thing as we did before. You never play with the original template, you make a copy of it. I'm going to create a copy. I'm going to create a variable called userTemplate copy, and this equals the original template. Now once we have the copy, the user template copy, we need to replace the name in there. So we say the user template copy is template copy, but we're going to replace the placeholder that we called name, and we're going to replace it with the variable called user.name. This will be the letter B. Then we're going to select users, and the inner HTML is going to be the user template. Let's reload. Now we have the server side rendering the template and also client side. Now to get to the part where things get complicated, imagine there's a lot of code here, and this is your template. Imagine that it's not called user anymore, the class, you call it user test. If you make a change to one of them, I mean, in the template, it will change actually all of them. Let's check it. Inspect the element. The server side render had the user test, and the client side render has also the user test. So we get and do something more advanced. We say that we would like to get the name in small letters, and we are going to set an H1 to the name. Save it, and let's do a style for the H1 because it's going to be too big. And we say that the font size is going to be, let's do 1.2 rems. Save it, and now we're going to test it. We reload. Now we get the name A and the name B. We inspect the element. We'll see that the H1 has been set server side, and the H1 has also been set client side. So this is how you guys can do server side and client side synchronized. Create a template, make a copy of the template, server side, and inject the template also client side, and use it by making a copy of it. Always make a. Alright guys, I hope you like the video. I hope it is useful, and I hope you will also subscribe and like it. Thank you very much.